generations to come.
And welcome to another edition of the TDN Writers Room podcast. My name is Bill Finley. I'm a correspondent for the TDN. I also co-host the Down the Stretch radio show every Saturday morning on Sirius XM along with Dave Johnson.
Hello, everybody. I'm Randy Moss with NBC Sports. As you might guess, with the Breeders' Cup fast approaching, I am surrounded by stacks of papers. I know Zoe always loves that, as well as computer files everywhere, as trying to do as best I can prepare for the experience that my buddy Jerry Bailey calls trying to drink water out of a fire hose. It's very tough to get ready for all these horses.
Zoe Cadman here with Santa Anita and First Racing. I've just got a little red book. I mean, I've got everything in here. This is all I'm going to need. It's my Bible. I've got no Taylor Swift information unless you watched a football game the other night. I am going to see Paw Patrol today with my godson. So I'm not sure you've seen that, Randy. Have you seen Paw Patrol? I'll let you know next week. That'll be our important thing to discuss this week.
Okay. I was very familiar with Dora the Explorer, but Paw Patrol, I'm not that good up on.
All right. I want to remind you that this week and every week we are brought to you by our good friends at Keeneland. So last week we had a debate, sometimes rather spirited, about whether or not the Horse Racing Integrity and Welfare Unit is a little bit heavy-handed, gone overboard in the case of Carrie Brion. Well, that case now has taken a turn. It looks like she is going to be exonerated, but a new story popped up in the TDN written by T.D. Thornton, which I thought personally was one of the best reported, best written stories that I've seen in a racing publication in a long time. I'm not just saying that because it was in the TDN. TD did a terrific job. It's about a fellow by the name of John Pimentel, a trainer. He's 68 years old, was 1 for 46 this year. And Hai Wu went and got him too, just like they went and got Carrie Brion. He got a positive for methamphetamine. And then he was also found that he was in possession of levothyroxine. And he is looking at 3 years suspension, $25,000 fine. And just as I would have said about Carrie Brion, my problem with this is many. But the biggest problem I have is that the way they're going about this, there doesn't seem to be any room for common sense. It's black, it's white. John Pimentel is not a cheater. He did not give the horse methamphetamine to try to win a race. The levothyroxine, he said, was something that he was using on a pony. This is not somebody who did anything wrong. This is a guy who's been around forever and has a great reputation. People love him. And now, unless he can get some decent lawyers, which again is another part of the story because these things apparently are so expensive that the little guy like John Pimentel cannot necessarily afford this. But he's looking at a major upheaval in his life and his career of a possible 3-year suspension for, in my estimation, a guy who did absolutely nothing wrong. This is not right. It needs to be fixed. Zoe, your turn.
Now, if I'm reading it correctly, it said that the A sample came back positive, the B sample came back positive. He's already signed something that he may or may not, maybe he shouldn't have signed it, and he has till October the 26th, I do believe, to have a meeting with the judge, with the FTC, to see if they can get something done about this. I know apparently Alan Foreman is on the case, but the thing that needs to be looked into, that I think there needs to be some money set aside for the people that do not have the funds to try and fight this, or at least give themselves a fighting chance, because that, to me, is what has happened here. You've got a mom and pop operation that doesn't have the funds, barely had the 7,500, barely had the money for the split sample. Something needs to be set aside to try and help these people at least defend themselves through sample A, sample B, and give them the knowledge to do things the right way, because it sounds like it's been a cluster from the get-go, as well as some things have been misreported. Some things have been written down. They called him Mr. Ruiz in one article, I do believe. Something was written. None of it really adds up, makes sense. So if this goes before a judge, maybe they're just going to toss it out and give him a pass. As far as the Kerry Bryan case, they came up with, I think on October the 20th, a new ruling that if your A sample comes up for a human drug, say it's cocaine, methamphetamine, or something a human can ingest as an addict, that they're not going to release any names, which is correct, and wait till the B sample comes back. And I think that is partly due to the Kerry Bryan case, which is the right thing to do. So slowly but surely they're finagling their way around, be it half blindfolded. I'm not really quite sure there's a right answer or a wrong answer right now, but the Kerry Bryan case, good things have come out of that, and those all got overturned. And now with that October 20th ruling, it looks like that human contamination is going to be, basically taken in course, and we'll go from there. So I don't really know what's going to happen with the Pimentels, but I have a feeling that they're going to fall down on the right side of this.
Hope so. I mean, you get an incredible amount of sympathy reading the story for the Pimentels. You pointed out things like cocaine, methamphetamine. I mean, there's no evidence that methamphetamine is a performance-enhancing drug in racehorses. And as we know, it's unfortunately very commonly used by human drug abusers, some of whom may or may not have been in contact with the horse in the starting gate and the test barn. You never know what might have happened. It's an unfortunate situation. But, Bill, I'm curious. I mean, look, this is a class 1 drug, right? And they are the very most serious drugs that are tested for. The horse tested positive for a class 1 drug. The split sample tested positive for a class 1 drug. We don't think it was purposely given to the horse. But if you were the czar of racing, horse tests positive for a class 1, what would you do? Just say, oh, you guys look like you're really good people. We're going to drop this. I mean, how would you handle it?
Well, okay, here's how I would handle it. And look, when it gets into pharmacology and what is a class 1 versus class 2, class 3, a lot of that is above my pay grade. But Randy, this is what I'm getting back to. My problem with HISA is that not just in this case, but in a lot of cases, I keep coming back to this. They don't use a lot of common sense. And then I guess to their credit, a lot of times they've come back and said, oh, you know what? Maybe we didn't have this rule right. We should change it. And they have done that. I think that they should have got these things right before they started and not, changing the rules as they go along. But again, common sense. Methamphetamine, cocaine, other things are used by humans and the humans that come in contact with horses. I would guess that in virtually 100% of the cases where a horse gets a methamphetamine positive is because someone along the way was a methamphetamine user, handled the horse, and contaminated the horse. So again, if it is a class 1 drug, which is the maximum, it shouldn't be. A matter of fact, I think I would go so to the extreme as that you might even now have to look at whether or not this is something that is not even something they should be charged with, period. I guess it would depend on the picograms or the nanograms or whatever, because they always talk about what is such a small amount into the horse. But, again, here in this country, we have a system where, justice is supposed to be fair. And John Pimentel did not do anything wrong. Nobody in their right minds thinks John Pimentel did anything wrong. And now his life has been turned upside down and he's looking at 3-year suspension from the sport, a man who's 68 years old. And I believe he has 7 horses in his care. So if methamphetamine is a class 1 drug, it shouldn't be treated that way. Sometimes I go back and look at the ARCI rules. I didn't on this one, but a lot of times they're a lot different. The old system. If you had told me that this horse got the meth positive, the guy definitely didn't do anything wrong, but we're going to suspend him for 10 days. I'd be fine with that. But we're not talking about 10 days. We're talking about 3 years. And I don't see how anybody can be fine with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe, one of the things that HISA could do, and as we've talked about before, they're sort of learning as they go along with some of these things and trying to correct rules that they feel like need to be corrected. And maybe when it's a drug of human abuse, it's not necessarily used on horses typically as performance enhancers. Maybe they can treat it a little differently. There was a fascinating case that is similar to this, actually. I live in Minnesota. It was here at Canterbury Park about 6, 7, 8 years ago. There was a trainer very similar to the Pimentels who had horses over a period of 3 years. He only had a handful of horses in his barn. Twice tested positive for methamphetamine. Mac Robertson, one of the leading trainers at Canterbury, who recently got involved with a HISA-HIWU controversy, he had a horse tested positive for methamphetamine. Subsequently, 2 members of the Starting Gate crew at Canterbury were busted for methamphetamine possession, right? It went to the racing commission and went to a judge. But ultimately, it was determined that if it was contamination from Starting Gate crew members who were handling the horses on a regular basis, then you would see dozens of methamphetamine positives that would pop up because these Starting Gate crew people handled horses all the time. But there were very, very few meth positives that were actually triggered. So the trainer was ruled off. And no one thought that he was guilty of giving his horses methamphetamine. But under the absolute insurer rule, he was responsible for all of his horses. Even though he said he tested his crew, drug tested them, he was ultimately found responsible. It's a tough situation to try to navigate.
Yeah, in the days of testing in picograms like we are now, one thing that horrifies me, and I'm not throwing blame on any gate crew at any part of the country whatsoever, is when a tongue tie comes loose at the gate and the gate crew puts the tongue tie back on. You don't know what that one particular guy may or may not have been doing. I mean, they should be wearing gloves as far as I'm concerned, just in case. Just for that one bad guy that may have been doing something awful that puts the tongue tie on your horse. If we're testing in picograms, there's a possibility. I mean, it's out there.
Test positive for a Big Mac.
I want to clear one thing up. I had said that they got 18 months for the meth. I said they got 3 years. Pimentel got 3 years for the meth. That's not correct. He got 18 months for the meth positive and another 18 months for the thyroxine that was found on the truck. And Randy, I agree. We butted heads on this a little bit. But I do agree with this is a difficult situation. But at the end of the day, this isn't right. And for this guy to be penalized the way he has been, well, then HISA figure out how to do this and come up with a better system. And then the other thing I said, I think I mentioned this with the Kerry Brion thing too, that bothers me a little bit about this. And, you see the reports, when the TDN writes this and all the people write in the comments, a lot of people say, well, they're just going after the little guy. They want to drive the little guy out of racing. That's a bunch of nonsense. But what we're seeing out of HIWU right now is a lot of guys that I never heard of, never in a million years, and some of the guys that I have heard of, never in a million years considered them to be cheaters. And then the 10, 12, 15 people in the sport that I'm relatively positive are cheating, I haven't caught any one of them. So, we had hoped that when they came in on May 22nd, this would be a new day in horse racing. We would get the bad guys. We would get the Jorge Navarros and the Jason Services of the sport. Okay, they've been at it less than 6 months or so. Maybe I should give them more time. But all I see them is getting these mom and pop outfits for, drugs that just really aren't considered by most sensible people to be major performance enhancing elements. So add that all up, and I think they're doing a lousy job.
Well, we can disagree on things, but one thing that I think the three of us all agree on is that we hope that the Pimentels ultimately get justice here and get their jobs back, and it becomes as happy an ending as you could possibly have in this circumstance.
Yeah, I mean, that has to be the solution, the end story. And hopefully 2 weeks from now, we'll be reporting on that and say, John Pimentel is back to work. And at the end of the day, common sense prevailed. But again, this is about the fourth or fifth time I've said it. What HISA needs to do is find a way to incorporate common sense into the rules and the way they go about things, and realize that things aren't always black and white. Even though Randy Moss and I don't always agree on things, I think maybe, as I see him smiling, that he agrees on that.
The TDN Writers' Room is brought to you by Keeneland. Saturday is closing day for the Keeneland Fall Meeting, featuring the Fayette Stakes and the Bryan Station Stakes. Both full fields. Looks like Cherie DeVoe will have more than looks in there at 9-5, be the one to beat in the Bryan Station Stakes. Every weekend of racing this fall has produced black type updates to the Keeneland November catalog. Check them out at november.keeneland.com. And finally, start your year off right. We're already looking forwards to next year. Start your year off by nominating your horses to the Keeneland January sale. The sale begins on Monday, January 8th. It will be cold. And the entry deadline is Wednesday, November the 1st. We'll be right back after this message from Keeneland.
At Keeneland, a horse will always be measured in hands. Hands that see, that sense, that speak. Hands that hold our sport to a higher standard, not for our sake, but for theirs, for the love of the horse, for generations to come.
In this week's edition of First Things First, I spoke with a couple of Hall of Famers, Richard Mandella, Mike Smith, and we spoke about a very special filly. How was the work, Dick?
Very nice. 3/4 and 12 and a little change. You galloped out 7 furlongs and 125 and change. So we got some wind in her today, and I think we're ready to go.
How excited are you leading up to Breeders' Cup with the daughter of Beholder? Because you're trying to stay under the radar, but it's going to be impossible.
Well, I don't know if exciting is the word. It's more stress and feeling of responsibility to get the job done.
Does she have any similar traits to her mother?
She can run it.
You had the first winner with Tina Ella from Beholder. What kind of a feeling was it for you to actually get one of her daughters to the winner's circle initially?
And she won a little stake race.
And she did.
It was very gratifying. And my mother passed away the day that filly was born. I never spoke about it before, but she's retired now. We can talk about it. But she was named after my mother.
That had to be super special. I can remember seeing you in the winner's circle, and I was wondering why you were so emotional that day.
No, I wasn't.
Well, that's a very cool story. The filly's walking around the barn. Does she have any little quirks we should know about, Richard?
No, she's just very sweet, and she's a different personality than her mother, other than she will, when the time is needed, she rises to the occasion.
Beholder had a long history with Songbird. Mike Smith rode Songbird. What went into the decision to put Mike on her in the first place?
Experience.
And that's all that matters. All right, Mike, take me through the work. It looked like you gained some company. Was that by design?
Was actually kind of hoping to. We didn't have nothing to work with her here, so I thought we'd let the first flight go off. And if it worked out, great. And if it didn't, she's a pretty good workhorse on her own if you want her to be. And we were fortunate to catch a little company, and she went really well this morning. Give him about a 5-length head start. She kind of run up to him. I gave her a breather around the turn and headed for home. I let her turn over to her right lead, and about the 8th pole, I wanted to see if she was there, and boy, she set me back in the seat. So all systems a go.
How cool is it for you to ride her, knowing you rode Songbird, who battled Beholder?
I even rode her mother once. I was blessed enough to have ridden her mother once and won on her. Yeah, it's pretty cool. It kind of means you've been around for a little bit, but it's pretty cool to see these young ones come up and kind of, you know, she's got a big, long ways to prove before she even comes halfway close to her mother, but she's certainly on the right track.
How much are you looking forward to Breeders' Cup this year?
Oh, I can't wait. Really looking forward to it, especially with getting the opportunity to ride a filly that's got the kind of talent she does. All goes well, man, the sky's the limit for her.
Great to hear from those connections. A filly with a very, very bright future indeed. Do want to remind you that racing at Santa Anita does continue this weekend, and we will have the Pumpkin Patch and Fall Festival, as well as the Smorgasbord Pizza Party this Saturday. Who doesn't love horse racing, beer, and pizza, guys? What about that filly, Tamra? She's pretty cool, isn't she?
I'm excited about Tamara, but I'm more excited about the horse racing, beer, and pizza. That sounds tremendous. So I might have to get on the red eye out to California. In other news this week, it was announced that Forte, last year's 2-year-old champion and winner of the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, has been retired and will now enter a stud career at Spendthrift Farm for a stud fee of $50,000. I'm absolutely surprised. No one, the horse had not had a workout since the Travers. They kept saying they were trying to make the Breeders' Cup. Nonetheless, he had some hoof problems, and they simply ran out of time. Maybe if the Breeders' Cup were run 3-4 weeks later, they probably could have done it. So I want to hear from you guys. What do we make of this horse in his career? And he was a brilliant 2-year-old, no doubt about that. He won the Hopeful, which is still up in the air because of the drug positive that day that the horse received. Breeders' Futurity, Breeders' Cup Juvenile, and looked like he was going to come into this year as a huge star. I'm not saying he had a bad year this year. I mean, you don't have a bad year when you win the Fountain of Youth, the Florida Derby, finish second in the Belmont, and win the Jim Dandy. But I guess the bar was set so high after last year that I was personally a little bit disappointed with him. I expected, better things from him. Now, a lot of it was that he had some bad luck. He was scratched the morning of the Kentucky Derby with a hoof problem. Owner Mike Rapoli and trainer Todd Pletcher were not at all pleased by that. Then the horse that he beat in the Florida Derby and Fountain of Youth, Mage, went on to win the Kentucky Derby, which would make you think that, well, if he beat Mage in the 2 Florida races, why wouldn't he have beaten him in the Kentucky Derby? But nonetheless, a very good horse. I'm sure he'll be very well received at Spendthrift. But I guess the word is star-crossed. He had a star-crossed career, and I don't think his 3-year-old campaign quite turned out like the connections would have hoped.
Obvious from the start that he was never quite the same horse. I mean, he had a workman-like Florida Derby. It looked like he went all out to get that win. I didn't love him going into the Kentucky Derby purely off of that effort. And his feet have plagued him throughout the year. Todd Pletcher said that he grabbed a quarter in the Travers, and that is what led to basically him being retired now because they haven't been able to get that right. So I think due to his foot issues, he's had problems the whole year. Because he's a champion, he was able to overcome them, and he overcame them in the Jim Dandy, and he did win the Florida Derby and was second in the Belmont. So, I mean, he is a champion. He is an absolute champion. As a 2-year-old, he was brilliant. I'm just not sure we saw the physical progression from him from 2 to 3, but he had the heart of a champion, and he also was plagued with foot issues. I actually looked up his Breeders' Cup Juvenile, and I'm like, let's just see who exactly he beat that day. So he beat Cave Rock, multiple Grade 1 winner. National Treasure came back to win the Preakness. Blazing Sevens was second in the Preakness and took down the Grade 1 Champagne. Curly Jack took down the Grade 3 Iroquois. Verifying, second in the Bluegrass. He won the Indiana Derby. Hurricane Jay's a stakes winner. Congruent is a stakes winner. Lost Ark took down the Wet Jockey Club Derby. So, I mean, he's beat some good horses as a 2-year-old and just proved his mettle by being able to win this year when I don't think he was probably 100% sound at any point this year. He was just plagued with problems. I'm actually really looking forward to seeing how he does at stud.
I don't think I ever gave the horse enough credit. When he beat Loggins in the Breeders' Futurity, I thought Loggins was the best horse. I was total bet against, I thought, with Forte in the Breeders' Futurity. I hated him going into the Kentucky Derby. Couldn't stand him going into the Belmont, coming off that long layoff, But you look back on it in hindsight, and you could certainly make the case that if he had run in the Kentucky Derby, he might have won. I mean, he's been 3 for 3 against Mage as far as finishing ahead of him. Every chance, every opportunity he's been given. He rallied to finish second in the Belmont to Arcangelo, despite the fact that he hadn't run in 10 weeks. The horse was clearly not a superstar horse. He was not a flashy horse. He was kind of a grinder, maybe even a bit of an overachiever, had problems, but I think he was better certainly than I gave him credit for. And he should be pretty well received, I would guess, in the Stallion Barn.
Yeah, and at the bottom line, 7 for 10 a lifetime with all those 6 stakes wins. And once again, the hopeful could be taken away from him. The way our system works, that will probably be decided about 2034 before we get a ruling on that. Hey, Zoe, I'm sure you were paying a close attention to the Champion Stakes over in the UK over the weekend. And because this is now 2 weeks before the Breeders' Cup, we don't get a whole lot of horses that want to come back and run back in 2 weeks. But King of Steel, who won the Champion Stakes with Frankie Dettori aboard, they have pre-entered him in the 2 Breeders' Cup races. They pre-entered him in the Classic and the Breeders' Cup Turf. And it would be very interesting to see what he does. Trainer Roger Varian has not confirmed that he will actually run in the Breeders' Cup, but I'd love to see this horse run in the Breeders' Cup Classic. A mile and a half might be a little bit, a mile and a quarter would be right up his alley, whereas maybe the mile and a half in the Turf would be a little bit long for him after he just won a mile and a quarter race. But how good is he? Does he belong in the Breeders' Cup? And if so, which race?
He's a good horse. He's a good horse. He ran second in the Derby. He's a massive horse. In fact, they monikered him the nickname, the police horse, when he was purchased. He's actually planning on coming back to America. He was purchased from the Keeneland September sale from the Gainesway consignment. Alex Elliott bought him and took Kia down to look at him and said, this horse is just massive. So they gave him the time. Some people called him the police horse because he was so big and he has overcome everything. They said he might not like Epsom because it's a tight track. They said he wouldn't like the heavy ground in the Champion Stakes. He didn't like the heavy ground. He absolutely hated it. I was watching it because I was glued to Champions Day because it was Frankie's supposedly last Champions Day. He won the first race. This horse was out the back door for most of the race, absolutely climbing and jumping imaginary objects. Like he just literally hated it, but he won down the middle of the course like a good horse that he is over ground that he didn't like. Will he like the tight track at Santa Anita? Probably not. He could probably overcome it. I don't know if he's going to come. They're going to leave it up to Roger Varian, who is a conservative trainer, to say the least. I like the fact they've entered him, but you don't know how much it takes out of a horse to run over ground like that. And it was so testing. So if he comes over here, that's great. But if he does, I'm almost positive that they will go in the Turf. A mile and a half downhill is no problem. Here at Santa Anita, they start off coming down the hill. So if he's a mile and a quarter horse, that'll help him. So he was the recipient of a brilliant ride by Frankie Dettori. And wow, what about Frankie going out on a win like that? That was something to watch. I've never seen like a scene like that at Ascot ever. Randy, you know the football chants that they were singing? It was like being at Wembley Stadium for the FA Cup. I mean, it was deafening. Did you hear it?
Yeah, I wish we had been there for that. There would have been just an electric environment to be a part of. It's so loud that before the race, Frankie kept having to shush the fans for fear that he would that the horse would be affected by it negatively. And then when he wins and the flying dismount, I thought nobody believes that's going to be his final mount in England. I mean, come on, he will rock.
Yeah, I was going to say that he'll be there next year, maybe for a couple of years to come.
He'll be there. He'll be when Royal Ascot rolls around next year. Frankie will be there. But as far as the horse coming over here, I don't know Roger Varian. He's had horses that ran very well in the Breeders' Cup. He's had 2 seconds and 2/3 previously in Breeders' Cup competition, but every one of those horses had at least 5 weeks between their last race in Europe and the Breeders' Cup race. Reading between the lines, and again, I haven't talked to Roger Varian, I get the impression that he doesn't really want to come, but it's the owner, Kier Jerbachian, who's AMO Racing, who's very aggressive owner, very high profile owner. He's a huge soccer sports agent over in Europe. Some of the biggest stars over there he represents. And at one point, he lived in New York City. He's got a love for the United States. He's got a wing of AMO Racing that runs in the United States, and he would dearly love to run he's run in the Breeders' Cup before. He would dearly love to have this horse in the Breeders' Cup. But he's going to leave it up to the trainer. I would kind of be surprised if he runs. I hope he does. And definitely he should run in the turf and not the classic. I went back and looked at this horse's pedigree. The last 2 dams you have run 62 times total, I think. There's not even a speck of dirt form in any of those horses. And I think it would just be another one of these cases where you throw them in the classic and they're beaten, 28 lengths. But he would have a heck of a chance in the turf. The TDN Riders Room, as always, brought to you by the PHBA, the Pennsylvania Horse Breeders Association. A couple of stakes wins by Pennsylvania breds last weekend at Aqueduct. 90% Maddie won the Carl Place Stakes at Aqueduct, and then also at Century Downs in Canada. A horse called Graded Coconut, bred by the Brunettini stables, broke his maiden in the Bird Catcher Stakes. So a couple of Pennsylvania breds with stakes wins last weekend. Also, this other note here as I'm reading, Wanamaker's currently accepting entries for the 3rd annual Pennsylvania Horse Breeders Association PA bred sale. That will take place in January. And again, our weekly reminder, don't forget the PA sired PA bred Stallion Series. The finale this year set for December 27th. The purse is now up to $200,000. 2-year-old colts, 2-year-old fillies, both at 1 mile and 70 yards. Check the PABred.com website to double check that your 2-year-old is nominated. If not, you may want to shoot an email to the PHBA. That address is info@PABred.com.
The PA Horse Breeders Association presents the Pennsylvania Stallion Series. 6 races for PA sired, PA bred 2-year-olds at Parks. 2 $100,000 contests at 5.5 furlongs. On August 21st, PA Day at the races. September 23rd, PA Derby Day has 2 races at 6.5 furlongs, both with a $150,000 purse. And in December, 2 races going long, each worth $200,000. For more, go to PABred.com.
The TDN Riders Room brought to you by the Fast Sires at WinStar Farm, which, of course, the sponsor every week of our Fastest Horse of the Week segment. Let's talk about the sire first. This is right up my alley. The newest sire at WinStar, drumroll please, 2 fills. How many times have we talked about 2 fills in the past year? I still say Arcangelo and 2 fills are the best 3-year-olds that we have seen so far this year. But more about 2 fills. He was a graded stakes winner as a 2-year-old, multiple graded stakes winner as a 3-year-old. He won his 4 stakes by a combined 26 lengths. The first 3-year-old of his crop with 3 straight 100-plus Beyer speed figures, including 105s in both the Derby and the Ohio Derby. On the rags, he got a 5.5 twice. That Kentucky Derby effort, he was the only horse who was up there on the pace, who was around fighting through the stretch run, wound up finishing second to Mage. A lot to like about 2 fills. The newest stallion at WinStar Farm. Now, the fastest horse of the week, if you were watching at Keeneland this past weekend, on Saturday you saw the Lexus Raven Run Stakes, and that race was won by Vava after a spirited stretch run. Vava wins by a half length. Alva Star was in that race as the 4-5 favorite. Alva Star was coming off back-to-back Beyers of 96 and 98, including an 8 3/4 length win in the Grade 2 Priory Stakes in New York. Alva Star turned into the stretch with a clear lead, but Vava ran her down with a 100 Beyer speed figure, our fastest horse of the week. The TDN Riders Room brought to you by the Green Group, the sponsor, of course, of our Green Group Guest of the Week. They are a tax consulting and advisory firm specializing in the thoroughbred industry and especially specializing in saving you money on your taxes. For more information, go to www.greenco.com.
Welcome in now the Green Group Guest of the Week, and happens to be Michael Banahan, the director of Bloodstock for Godolphin. If you think Godolphin, you think Breeders' Cup, you think of a ton of success. They've won 16 Breeders' Cup races, including 4 last year, and Michael's been overseeing their small army ready to descend on Santa Anita. Michael, first of all, let's just get a couple news and notes out of the way. How many horses did you pre-enter? And a couple that I wasn't quite sure which race they might go in. Pretty mischievous. Which one is she going in, and which one is Maj going in?
So really, or for me, I would know more about her domestic horses than I will the European ones. But from what I gather, Maj will go in the mile. I know she stretched out the last day in the Queen Elizabeth, but I think from what Saeed was saying, I think the mile she'd be more comfortable going in the mile. So we'll end up probably having 2 in there. I think Charlie is going to run Master of the Season there as well. So we'll be double fisted in there. Looks like we'll have 7 American horses, hopefully to represent us. And I think 4 from Europe will be coming over. It's a little bit smaller group from Europe than we had in the past.
So, Michael, we'll be kind of skipping through some of your horses here while we fortunately got you. But one horse I want to start with is the horse that probably is the best known of all the Godolphin horses, Codys Wish, for many reasons. Obviously, he's a fantastic racehorse, and then the whole Cody Dorman story as well. That's captured the attention of so many people outside of the inner circle. I'm just curious, what's it been like to be part of the inner circle at Godolphin through the whole Codys Wish saga?
Look, it's been tremendous. It's an unbelievable story. We're so fortunate to be a small part of it, really. We feel like the Dorman family, and they're such a wonderful family all along, and they've been so gracious about being involved in the horse and sort of going side by side with him. And it's just been so uplifting, I think, for lots of people that have challenging issues, and probably no more than we see with Cody Dorman himself. And he's such a inspiration for a lot of people that might be having tough days. And, you know, you go back and you look at some of the clips that NBC had last year at the Breeders' Cup, and it'll make you feel like how fortunate you actually are. So, look, it's been an absolute wonderful journey, and we're so happy that we're a little part in that as well. So, and plus highlighting what a fantastic racehorse Codys Wish is himself as well. So to have that combination of a great story, uplifting story, and to have a fantastic horse doing it as well has been unbelievable.
It is a superb story, Michael. And the fact that they actually met each other when he was still a foal, when he was still a yearling, is just, to me, one of the best stories I think that we've had in horse racing in a long time. Is there a chance that we see Codys Wish, Cody the person, come out to Santa Anita?
Yeah,
do you know?
The plan is for the whole Dorman family to come out to Santa Anita and be part of, hopefully, celebration. I think, you know, seeing him when he got beaten in the Whitney the last time, they were there up in Saratoga, and they still embraced the whole experience of being there, the goodwill behind them when they were based on the at the restaurant in the front of Saratoga there. You know, when they were going out for the to the paddock, people were giving a round of applause and cheering them when they came back in as well. So just, I think it even goes further than you know, racing itself, and it's hit people outside the industry and just the general public. And I think people that don't have any interest in racing or are very marginal have really cottoned on to this great story as well. And but hopefully, you know, they'll all make it out there, and they'll be there to cheer Codys Wish on in what'll be his last race, hopefully.
How's he doing?
By all accounts, doing super. Talked to Bill Mott this morning. He's extremely happy with him. had a very good breeze on the weekend and couldn't be doing any better. Sound happy and healthy, and I think we got what we needed out of the Vosburg, and we're ready to roll in Santa Anita, and hopefully we can duplicate what he did last year.
Michael, I know you say that really your expertise and your area is the U.S.-based horses, but I'm sure you can speak for Godolphin in general, and more so than perhaps any stable in the world, Godolphin has embraced the Breeders' Cup like no other. Like I said, 16 Breeders' Cup wins for last year. Other than the obvious, the big purses and everything, but, what is it about the Breeders' Cup that the Godolphin team has made it such a big part of its something that it targets so heavily every year?
Championship racing. That's what we're trying to do. It's the biggest race day at the end of the year for us, and if we can fortunate enough to get horses to compete at the Breeders' Cup, we know we're competing with the very best horses across, not only in America but across the world, and that's where we want to compete at the very top level. And so I think the Breeders' Cup over the last 25 years or so, we see that the best horses, we know by the Eclipse Award voting that people pay attention to those races at the end of the year, and the Breeders' Cup are the collection of all the best horses in America, and we got such a great foreign contingent that come over as well. So I think that is why it's important to us. But like lots of races are important through the year, but it's the end of the year. It's the Super Bowl, the NBA playoffs. It's what it is in our sport, is to win the Breeders' Cup races, or compete in them anyway.
So, Michael, one thing that's always fascinated me is the international battle for global thoroughbred domination between Godolphin and Coolmore. And I know it's a friendly rivalry, and now there's been a little crossover with, the stallions being embraced by each side and the other. How much do you think the presence of Coolmore spurs on Godolphin and vice versa?
Oh, I think it's the same with any big athletic organizations, be it humans or horses. The great basketball teams need their big rivals. We see it in college football, basketball here. The in-state rivals, they're the big games. So anytime you want to be a leader of whatever industry sport you're in, your nemesis are always going to be the ones that are going to drive you to hopefully higher bar set with them all the time to get those big wins. And I'm sure each organization we drive each other on, but it's I don't think we just look at one other opposition that's great out there. There's a great friendly rivalry, I think, between lots of people in the racing industry, and we depending on who's in the race, we're going to be big competitors with whoever it might be, whether it's Coolmore, Juddmonte, or Rapoli Stable, or whoever it might be, And I think anyone that's in this industry, whether you're $2 better or you're competing in the Kentucky Derby, you're competitive and you want to win those big races.
Talking of big races, you'll have one going forward in the Classic by the name of Proxy, who will probably be flying under a lot of people's radars. Mike Stidham, a good friend of mine. I know you were on hand for his most recent work at Keeneland. Tell us about the work. I'm not sure it went to plan, but it looked like it actually couldn't have come out better.
Yeah, some of these things you can script them, and sometimes they work out for you, sometimes they don't. But ended up getting in with some additional company. We had a 2-year-old in there to give him a lead horse to work with, which we were very happy to do. And it was we thought we had it teed up nicely, and suddenly we got some extra company. But it actually worked out very well in the end. And Proxy finished strong, galloped out strong. Joel Rosario was very happy with him. Mike and Hillary were very happy with him as well. So, Proxy, he's not the best workhorse in the world. He just does enough. Very untappet-like. He's calm, cool, and collected, and so some of that's good, some of it's maybe bad, but he'll keep a little bit for himself, and he'll just do enough. And great thing about having Joel Rosario in, working him all fall as well. He knows him very well. He's ridden him in his last few races, and they have a good rapport with each other. And Joel knows what he needs to get out of him as well. And so hopefully that worked. I was very happy with it, and hopefully the horse got a bit of confidence out of it, and Joel got a bit of confidence in him. And as you say, we'll probably come under the radar, all those 3-year-old hot shots that are in there that look like the horses to beat. And if we get a good run, and he's very consistent, we'd like them hit the winning line in a couple more of those races, but he's been beaten, photo finishes in 2 mile and a quarter races this year. We think the distance will suit him very well. So yeah, we're expecting a big run out of him.
Let me jump in here with a follow-up real quick. Yeah, we've talked about Proxy a lot, Michael, over the last few months, and it seems like sometimes he takes that sort of "I'll do just enough to get by" attitude a little too far. Like during the running of his races as well. He's been kind of enigmatic at times, right? I know he's been frustrating to Mike Stidham at times. Got the cheek pieces now. Where is he mentally right now, you think, going into the Classic?
Oh, look, he seems very good. Seeing him, multiple times down at Keeneland over the last month. He, was good going to the pole the other day. Looked like he was really wanting to do a little bit. He's a happy horse. He's a great attitude about him. So I'd say mentally he's good. Just everything has to go for him, and if he's on song, and he always seems like he wants to give the competition a little bit of a leg up. We've seen that even from his 3-year-old days down at the fairgrounds, and horses like Mandaloon and Midnight Bourbon, whoever down there, he'd be in the race and then he'd drop back a little bit and you'd say, okay, well, he's gone, and then he'd come with this furious rally down the stretch and just miss out and say, okay, we're going to have something the next day. And it took him a while to mature and try to figure that out. But we saw him in Oaklawn this year, was a good example of him being on song and really going well and tracking well. And I think, getting a bit of pace in a race suits him very well. And again, I think Joel Rosario is important. He understands that he maybe want to, he's like the teenage boy in middle school that wants to look out the window halfway through class and he's not paying attention, and then the teacher calls on him. So I think Joel knows what he's like and can hopefully keep him engaged in the race. And he's very, very consistent. He's only been out of money a couple of times in his races, and I think he'll be running down hard in the stretch. Whether he can get there or not, but hopefully having a little bit of pace in the race and staying engaged in there, we're expecting a big run from him. And in the Santa Anita handicap, he ran very well out there, and it was our testing grounds to see how he'd like to handle the track and like the track, and it seemed like that went well. We would have loved to have come away with that Grade 1 win, but just didn't quite get there in time. So hopefully he'll make up for it in Saturday week.
Mike, I apologize for asking you still another question about the foreign horses, but it's such a great group, and I'm sure you'd have opinion on this. Charlie Appleby, since 2021 in North America, 56 starters, 24 winners, 43%, 23 stakes winners, 15 Grade 1s. How does he do it? The part of the answer obviously is he has very good horses, but it seems to be something more than that he has figured out exactly the right horse to bring in and exactly for what race. What is beyond the obvious, like I said, that, the kind of horse flesh that he's dealing with is the answer for just, these numbers that just pop off the page.
Well, Charlie is an excellent trainer and a very good horseman. And through his time with Godolphin, and he's been with Godolphin a long time before he took the mantle as the head trainer, and would have travelled all around the world and would have seen firsthand the type of horse you need to bring to different destinations, whether it's America, Australia, continental Europe, or wherever it might be, or Dubai itself. He understands that very well. understands what his horse is like and which ones will perform well in a pace in a race in America and on a flat track as well. And he has, and again, as you said, they are good horses as well, but sometimes they look like they're elevated a little bit when they get to America in that pattern of a race and the style of a race. And he's just identified those horses, and obviously he's got plenty of them, but he's identified the right horses. And you don't really see him just throwing horses in a race and hoping that, some of it will stick a little bit. He really deep dives into which horses he thinks are the appropriate horses to bring out to America that'll be competitive. And like a lot of people, Charlie is competitive, likes to win those races, and doesn't feel like it's necessary just to fill races for someone else. And the ones he brings out, as you said, they're very, very competitive. And but he's figured that out. And I think just the experience he's had over the years really coming to fruit now. And maybe he was able to see all that when he wasn't in the high pressure situation where he was the head trainer. And I think just garnering all that experience and information has led him to make really, really good decisions on which horses fit in the top races, and especially the ones we've seen him in America. And his record has been so stellar over the last couple of years, from Saratoga to the Breeders' Cup, or coming here to Keeneland, or wherever it might be in Canada as well. And so I think he's figured out who he needs to bring for the Breeders' Cup, and I'm sure Master of the Season will be his run at Keeneland will give him a big chance in the mile.
You mentioned the tough 3-year-olds that you'll be going up against with Proxy in the Breeders' Cup Classic. In the distaff, you got a couple of really tough older fillies and mares to have to deal with there, with Idiomatic and Clairiere. How do you think Pretty Mischievous and Wet Paint, the 3-year-olds that you've got in there, stack up against the older fillies and mares?
Yeah, well, it's going to be very interesting. This is probably one of the early clashes of the generations, and we don't really know. I know we did see a 3-year-old winning up in New York in the Beldame, so that gives the 3-year-olds a bit of clout. We're very happy. Brad Cox and Brendan Walsh are extremely happy with the way those two fillies are coming into the distaff. They've been resolute all year long, ultra consistent. And, Wet Paint, I think she's thrived from getting that little bit of a break since the Alabama coming in. She had a great workout last weekend, looked super on the gallop out. She's another one that I think will enjoy a bit of pace in the race. It looks like Idiomatic will want to be out there jumping on the lead. Looks like Bob Baffert's filly will have a bit of pace in there as well. So I think it'll suit her. She's been consistent all year long since she's been down in Oaklawn in the winter time. Pretty Mischievous. She's hard knocking, consistent filly. Looks like she's getting better as the year goes on. We're just, we're hoping and expecting a nice dry track out there. It seemed like, Tyler had said that she didn't appreciate the track at Parks that time. And I think, Brendan has been very happy with her breezes last weekend. She had another very, very good work. So we're coming in there with two fillies that are doing as well as they can. And then we're all going to see which generation is the better group. But we couldn't be happier with our two fillies coming in there. And nice having two different styles. Pretty Mischievous will just be stalking just off there. Wet Paint will probably be coming from the back of the pack a little bit. So it gives us two shots that are complementary to each other.
Michael, how do you decide at the beginning of a horse's 2-year-old year where they're going to go? Like, how do you decide that Pretty Mischievous is going to go to Brendan Walsh and Wet Wet Paint is going to go to Brad Cox, and Proxy is going to go to Michael Stidham. How do you come up with, do you draw names out of a hat and say, all right, you go there, you go there, you go there? How does it work?
Yeah, well, we sort of at least try to do somewhat strategically, and depending on what we've seen pre-training, we've got some great operations both in Florida and Kentucky that pre-train for us, and we see them multiple times through the spring down there, and we sort of determine which ones will suit which trainer. But really, it'll come down to families, and if Brad has a particular horse that he has trained siblings before, or the same with Bill Mott or Mike or whoever it might be, I think it's very important to keep those families with those trainers that have had success with them. They know their idiosyncrasies, a little bit about them as well. And I think that's worked out well. We try to balance it up as much as we can. In the Breeders' Cup, whether all the horses get in or not, the 5 trainers we use in North America look like they'll all have an entry in there, which is fantastic. And it's nice to have that balance between them all. And it's not one trainer maybe getting them all. But we've been lucky with that. But we certainly like them to be spread out between them all and give everyone a fair chance. And depending on what circuit they need to be on as well, and where they're going to be able to develop them well. So it's we've been lucky the last couple of years. That's worked out really well for us.
Michael, you're a big fan of National Hunt racing over in England and Ireland. Randy goes to Cheltenham. Give us one horse to follow. I know you have a top 10. I was talking to Hillary earlier.
Well,
Constitution.
Yeah, I was going to say the exact same, but I'll give you a different one, Randy. El Fabiolo. Try him instead.
El Fabiolo.
Yeah. Who trains him?
Willie Mullins. Yeah. Okay. So Mike Stidham is a big fan of as he might have told you. So not that he's a great National Hunt guy, but he's a massive fan of Willie Mullins and his what he's done over the course of the last 20 years. He's Charlie Whittingham, Woody Stevens, and everyone else wrapped into one in the jump racing.
Is it hyperbole to say that Constitution Hill is the flight line of jump racing?
He's a hurdler.
Okay, hurdle racing. I don't even know the difference between. If they jump over an obstacle, Zoe, I consider that jump racing. I don't know what the difference is.
Hurdles are the little ones. The steeplechase are the big ones.
Exactly. So I would think that they would probably think that the flight line is a Constitution Hill rather than the other way around, from what I've read. But yeah, look, he looks like a superstar horse, and. But in all honesty, I'm all in flat mode. Breeders' Cup. That's where I wouldn't even think. I mightn't even get my 10 to follow list done because it'll be so far down the list.
Yeah, who else is in flat mode? Bill Finley.
There you go. All right. Well, Michael, thank you so much for joining us as the Green Group Guest of the Week. Once again, Godolphin is going to bring a just army of talented horses into this year's Breeders' Cup. 16 Breeders' Cup wins for the Godolphin stable going back to the inception. Michael, thanks so much for your time. Best of luck. We've got about a week and a half till the big day. And I'm sure those Godolphin blue silks will be finding the winner's circle quite often. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks very much, Bill. Appreciate it. Thanks, Zoe. Thanks, Randy.
As this week's Green Group Guest of the Week, Godolphin's Michael Banahan will receive a free 1-hour text consultation from Lynn Green and Company at the Green Group. And for more information, again, on how the Green Group can save you money on your taxes, especially if you're in the horse business, again, www.greenco.com.
Are you paying too much in taxes? The Green Group can help. There's a reason the most successful owners, breeders, and horsemen select the Green Group as their tax advisors. They save you money and share successful strategies. Over the past 40 years, the Green Group founder, Len Green, has owned and bred some of the best racehorses in the history of the sport, like Eclipse Award-winning champions Jaywalk and Wonderwheel. His DJ stable competes at the highest level and has received the game's most prestigious honors. Len Green's in-depth, hands-on industry knowledge, combined with cutting-edge tax-saving strategies, has produced positive results for his clientele and has made the Green Group the top-rated accounting and tax firm in the thoroughbred business. For a confidential and complimentary consultation, contact us at 732-634-5100 or visit our website at www.greenco.com. The Green Group, proven strategies to save you taxes.
The Factor, a perennial leading sire of winners. He was third in the nation by winners in 2021 and 2022. His progeny include Grade 1 winners Sistron and Noted and Quoted, Grade 2 winner Charmaine's Mia, and Millionaires Bound for Nowhere. And factor this, with dozens of six-figure yearling sales, he's a proven sire on the track and in the sales ring. The Factor, standing at Lane's End.
The Lane's End Stallion of the Week is The Factor. Now, we just heard Randy giving it all about the PA breds. The Factor was the sire of a 2-year-old stakes winner this week when the PA bred Grated Coconut took the Birdcatcher Stakes in Canada, breaking his maiden in the black type event by 12 lengths. Over 12 lengths, in fact. That moves the Factor into a tie for second place on the list of stallions by 2-year-old black type winners in 23, behind the one and only Justify. The Factor has 15 individual 2-year-old winners. He's a must breed. The Factor, a leading sire of Warfront standing at Lane's End for the bargain price of $10,000.
And Bill, where was that race in Canada run?
Century Downs.
Century Downs.
There you go. Well, an interesting race on Saturday at Santa Anita, the 9th race on the card, a maiden special weight race, and looked loaded on paper. Bob Baffert had 3 horses entered in the race, and here were his jockeys: Ramon Vasquez, Mike Smith, and Kyle Fry. Now, you would look at the jockey choices and figure that maybe in Baffert's estimation, the Fry horse was not necessarily the best of the bunch because he was the lowest profile jockey among the 3 that he named. The horse is by the name of Nisos. And not only did he win, he went out and won by 10.5 lengths, paid $14.80. Now, if you had done any homework like I did, didn't mean I was smart enough to bet on this horse. Baffert has used Fry exactly one other time during his entire career, and that horse won and paid $28.60. So that's that sneaky jockey-trainer combination. And I didn't realize until later, after Steve Anderson wrote a story in the Daily Racing Form about Kyle Fry, that he took about 2 months off this summer, right in the beginning of the Del Mar meet, because he was mentally exhausted. I mean, mental health issues are something that people are much more willing to talk about in this day and age. And I guess he needed to just press the reset button. No better way to press the reset button than to come back and win on a Bob Baffert TDN Rising Star by Nyquist to win by 10.5 lengths. Will he keep the mount? Well, that remains to be seen, but no reason to take him off right now. He's perfect for Bob Baffert. Nobody else can say that, Zoe.
No, and it's Kyle Fray. Good kid, really, really good kid. He's funny. He's a good rider. You give him the horse, he can do it. And he proved it the week before on Winstock, who'd had 2 sprint races to his credit. It was first time stretching out. Bob's only instructions were just go to the lead. Just go fast and keep going. And that is exactly what he did. This horse, if you'd watched his replays, cannot stand dirt in his face. Cannot stand. Jumps up and down. Just hates it. So Kyle just sent him to the lead and he drew off and won like a good thing. Part of the reason he got the mount, there's a girl at Santa Anita who comes to Clocker's Corner. Her name is Kelly Gredvig. She's 12 years old at heart, and she bugs Bob every time she sees him and is like, "Hey, Bob." And she's in love with Kyle. Kyle's a great guy. And she's like, "Hey, Bob, you got to put Kyle on a horse. What's wrong with Kyle?" And she's bugged him and bugged him and bugged him. So the credit goes to Kelly Gredvig for getting Kyle on the first horse. So then we told Kyle, you got to pay Kelly. Kelly's at the races every single time we have race. She comes out with her dad. She's got shares in my racehorse, and she's super passionate about the game. So she got that one. She kept bugging Bob, and Bob's like, "I'll put him on another one." And there you have it. Nisos was ready to run this summer at Del Mar. Things didn't go his way for whatever reason. He never made the races. He missed a couple of works. But he's been ready for quite some time. And in speaking to Jimmy, he was like, he was flying under the radar, but he's a pretty good horse. So I think Bob was surprised when they were going down the backside. I was watching and I'm like, oh, Kyle, don't do it. Don't go head and head with Bob's other horse. He'll never put you on a horse again. But he kept his horse way off the other one and they went fast. And fortunately, he won. Bob can't take him off because he won by 10 and drew off. He's not an overly big son of Nyquist. I actually swung by the barn because I was more enamored by Bob's other two in the running of the race. I had a good look at them in the paddock and was just ignoring Nysos. And he looks really good. He bounced out of the race, 96 by a speed figure. It's a good story. And Kyle Frey is a good kid and a good rider.
It's great to have somebody like Zoe in Southern California who's keyed into all those little details. And by the way, it was Glenn Fry and not Glenn Frey with the Eagles, but who knew there was Kyle Frey? So, you know what I think is interesting about this is there are a lot of gamblers out there, a lot of horse players who think that these horse trainers know everything about their horses, even unstarted 2-year-olds. And they're probably thinking, oh, Baffert bet on this horse, or the people associated with Bob bet on this horse at 6-1. They knew this horse was going to run that good. They put Kyle Frey on him to get a price. That's what they were doing. Of course, nothing could be further from the truth. If Baffert knew that this horse was capable of running a 96 Beyer speed figure and beating his other two by 10 3/4 lengths, I promise you the horse would not have been 6-1 on the board. Bob knows too many people in Southern California. But the horse looks very, very promising. And, just another example of how loaded the Baffert barn is, not this year, but every year with these young prospects.
And Juan Hernandez was serving a suspension over the weekend. Might the jockey situation have been different if he were available? Well, we'll find out down the road. But yeah, let's hope Bob keeps young Mr. Frey on the horse because he certainly deserves that opportunity. All right, Zoe, you've been our eyes and ears at Santa Anita working for XBTV. You've been out in the mornings. We're hearing great things about Arabian Night. There's news about White Abarrio. Give us your Zoe Cadden's up close and personal workout report for what you've seen so far with the Breeders' Cup horses.
Well, we'll lead off with Arabian Night. He was absolutely sensational yesterday morning, zipping in 1:11 and 2. Now, he worked on his own, which is unusual for Bob. He likes to work his horses in company. And the fact he worked that easy, he's got such a lovely, big, fluid stride. He just cruised around there and galloped out in 124 and change. He has been the work of the day. And I was joking with Bob because he worked him 7/8 because the day before, Tamara worked 7/8. And I was talking to Bob about it. I'm like, did you see Tamara work? He's like, oh my God. He goes, that Dick Mandela, he's got balls. He's like, I couldn't do that to a 2-year-old filly. He goes, he's old school. And I joked about it with Bob and Richard. I'm like, hey, Bob, tell Richard what you said. So he told him. And she was terrific. She caught some company and absolutely blew the doors off the company. And she's got to be a single on anybody's ticket. Tamara was brilliant working the other day with Mike Smith. Arabian Night was good. Clairiere, maybe flying under the radar for trainer Steve Asmussen. She worked in 59 and 4. Just after the rush, she didn't get a perfectly clean trip. She has to be on your radar. Prince of Monaco worked out the gate because Bob said he's lazy. He worked in 112 out the gate. Speedboat Beach, he worked out the gate on his own in 111, and he'll go forward in the sprint. He looked terrific. So there's an awful lot of horses. I know one that you'll be interested in, Bill, the Chosen Vron, who's going to be off everybody's radar, the little Calbred. He worked on the training track 101 and change. He's filled out, he's grown up. If there's any horse you're going to get a price on in the Breeders' Cup, it will be the Chosen Vron, and he is not to be ignored. He's looked terrific.
Mm-hmm. So what's the White Abarrio story?
White Abarrio actually went out and trained this morning. He was on everyone's radar to see him work yesterday. He did not come out. He's had sore feet, basically. It was documented the last time he missed a work that the renowned farrier Ian McKinley came out and took a good look at him. Apparently, everyone's saying it's his feet, so they're going to try and maybe see if they can get him to work on Wednesday. He's been training. He really hasn't missed anything, and everyone is certain it's his feet. So I think they're just going to take it on a day by day. I went by and saw him. Chip Dutro's there. Rick Dutro flew in. He's there, and he was simply saying, we're just going to wait and see. So right now, it's a day-by-day prognosis. He did train this morning, and he looked very good. And honestly, missing a few days, that's not going to throw me off of him. But right now, if I'm looking at these horses, the one that's jumping off the page of the Classic has to be Arabian Night. Has to be. What about you, Randy?
My problem with Arabian Night is just the presence of Saudi Crown in there and what that's going to do to the pace scenario, just handicapping the race of the Breeders' Cup Classic. But what I find interesting about it, I may have told this story before on the podcast, but going back 4 months ago or so, 3-4 months ago, it was before the Haskell. It was certainly, before the Pacific Classic. I'm voting in this weekly Breeders' Cup Classic poll, and I'm looking at Taiba, right, who was second in the Breeders' Cup Classic last year at Flightline. And I don't, he hasn't trained in a while, and Bob's got defunded, and Bob's got, several of these, a national treasure. So I did text Bob. I say, hey, what's going on with Taiba? I'm doing this classic poll, and I don't know whether to put him, is he even a candidate at this point to run in the Breeders' Cup Classic? And he said, well, I don't know. The answer was no, but he didn't tell me no. But he said, don't leave Arabian Night out of your poll. And I was like, really? And he hadn't run since, months. And he thought Arabian Night should be in my top 3 classic contenders. Now, this is even before the Haskell. So, Arabian Night has been front and center in Bob's mind as far as a Breeders' Cup Classic contender for a long time. And I think now we're seeing why.
Who rides him? Pratt won the Pacific Classic on him. Would he ride him?
Question, Zoe.
I don't know.
A jockey question. The answer to that for me is I don't care. I don't care who rides it because I know it's going to be a top jockey, and the difference between top jockey A and top jockey D to me is less than negligible. So I don't really care who rides it, but okay. I know a lot of people do, including you, Zoe, and I don't know.
All right.
Sorry.
That's okay. The TDN Writers Room is brought to you by XB TV. This week's XB TV Work of the Week, we've talked about her a lot already, is Tamara. She breezed 6 furlongs in 1:12.3 and galloped out in 1:24.3 under Hall of Famer Mike Smith. And if you just watch her, she caught some company with an unraced 2-year-old colt of Mark Glatz, and it really helped her along, and Mike Smith was absolutely delighted by the work. She's not an overly big filly, but she dropped down about the 8th pole, and she took off. That is about as good as you are going to see any horse, let alone a 2-year-old filly, work over this track at Santa Anita. She will be an absolute force to be reckoned with, and we'll be right back after this message from XB TV.
All the thrills. Fraction of the bills. Experience the power of the partnership. Change your life, make new friends, and compete at the highest level of thoroughbred racing. West Point Thoroughbreds, the gold standard in racing partnerships. Visit westpointtb.com.
And finally, one more bit of housekeeping, very important bit of housekeeping. The TDN Writers Room is also brought to you by West Point Thoroughbreds. We mentioned the fastest horse of the week, Vava, and her win Saturday in the Lexus Raven Run Stakes at Keeneland. That's West Point Thoroughbreds. West Point also had a feature race win Friday at Keeneland with a horse called Brigadier General. And looking forward, Giants Game entered in the Fayette Stakes at Keeneland this next weekend. And of course, on Breeders' Cup weekend, Carson's Run. We've talked about what a fabulous story Carson's Run is, very similar to Codys Wish. He is pre-entered in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf, and Slider is one of about 58 horses pre-entered for the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf Sprint. Those, again, are both West Point. And then there is this. Guys, do you know where joining a West Point Thoroughbred partnership can vault you?
Right.
Into the winner's circle.
Into the winner's circle.
Into the world of instant camaraderie.
Camaraderie, yes.
Camaraderie. To learn more about that, visit westpointtb.com.
All right, well, that's a wrap on another show. I want to thank my partners, Randy Moss and Zoe Cadman. Our Green Group guest of the week, Michael Banahan from Godolphin. Our editors, our co-editors, Katie Petruniak, I'm demoting Katie by accident. Our co-producer, Katie Petruniak and Anthony LaRocca, and our editors, Aaliyah LaRocca and Nathan Wilkinson. Getting close to the Breeders' Cup. It's getting exciting. Next week, we'll give you some handicapping opinions on the Breeders' Cup. For all the team here at the TDN Writers Room Broadcast Podcast, thanks for joining us. See you next week.